We're walking now towards Reading's marketplace. In the 15th century, it was a bustling centre of trade with stalls and shops lining today's roads, the Church of St Lawrence towering nearby. And behind us here is Friar Street, back then called New Street, where Elizabeth Clerk and her husband Thomas, a draper, lived. They attended St Lawrence's Church and are both buried here. She would have run their household and assisted in Thomas's business duties in and around the town. They would have known Reading Abbey and lived not too far from its entrance. It stands in ruins today through events of the dissolution of the monasteries, but also because of later military action during the English Civil War. In the 15th century, it was a huge network of buildings that served as a centre of worship with its community of monks, but it was also a place for local decision-making. Founded by Henry I in 1121, kings including Henry VI, Edward IV, Richard III and Henry VII all held parliaments here. Here at Reading Abbey, not far away from where Elizabeth and Thomas Clerk lived over on Friar Street in that direction, Edward IV was assembled with his nobility. They were all wearing expensive furs and jewels and collars, and he was about to drop a political bombshell. Edward began his reign in 1461, having defeated the Lancastrians and seized the throne. His advisers hoped he would marry into a foreign alliance, boosting England's power and security. The problem was, as Edward declared to his gathered nobility, he had already secretly married. Within the walls of Reading Abbey, Edward IV introduced Elizabeth Woodville, a commoner, and awkwardly, the widow of a soldier who had fought for Edward's enemies, as his queen. But it was not for a king to marry for love, but for the good of his country. The Earl of Warwick, Richard Neville, was so offended by the marriage, said the Milanese ambassador in 1465, that the men came to very great division and war together. Another report stated that for the sake of finding means to annul it, all the nobles are holding great consultations in the town of Reading, where the king is. The marriage could not be dissolved, and 8 months later Elizabeth was crowned at Westminster Abbey. The couple went on to have 10 children. Elizabeth Clerk and her husband Thomas lived just streets away, and they would have been aware of the excitement surrounding the town as Edward IV came with his new queen, with his new wife Elizabeth Woodville, right here. Elizabeth and Thomas Clerk would have seen these fractious nobles conspiring within the town and were eyewitnesses to a monumental event of the Wars of the Roses. Taking Edward's actions as a mark of disrespect, Warwick, who helped Edward to the throne, switched sides and fought against him on the side of the Lancastrians. Behind me are the ruins of Reading Abbey Church, and it was here that Elizabeth Woodville's sister, Margaret, made the first steps into becoming a countess. Margaret Woodville married Thomas FitzAlan, Lord Maltravers, heir to the Earl of Arundel, here at the altar of Reading Abbey Church. As light streamed in through its stained glass windows, Margaret secured her future. Another Reading couple, John and Jane Bowyer, were parishioners of St Giles's Church, where they were buried in 1521. John was a tanner and lived near St Giles, somewhere close to where I'm walking here. The couple are recorded as active in the community from the 1480s, and the town's papers also show that John was involved in the town's government, providing weapons and men to Henry VIII in 1513, probably for the Battle of Flodden. Around 3 miles away from Reading is the village of Tilehurst. Here in St Michael's Church are buried William and Isabella Moore. William was a marshal of the court of Henry VI, and imagine what tales he went home and told his wife of what went on there. William would have kept order in Henry's volatile court, which can't have been an easy job. They had 3 sons and 2 daughters, all depicted on their brass, along with the couple, their hands pressed together in prayer. Isabella wears the distinctive butterfly headdress of the period. There's no trace of Isabella at court, but we know that wives actively worked to maintain their household and oversaw the education of their children. The presence of women on the edges of court also opens questions about what knowledge they had, particularly at a time of secrets, changing loyalties and rebellion. We only know a few key facts about William and Isabella's life, and there's no evidence that they played any major role during the Wars of the Roses, but I think acknowledging their presence and that they lived through it in their various roles goes some way into helping us understand the wider influence of the Wars of the Roses as a whole. You can find out more about other women who lived and worked during this period, who witnessed fighting, clawed back property, or witnessed executions in Forgotten Women of the Wars of the Roses, published by Pen and Sword Books. Thanks for watching.